Y'all all set?
All set?
We got about 5 more people coming in.
We do?
Get them all in.
Yep.
Squeeze them in.
We have the fire chief in the room, so exceeding
We're good.
capacity may not be our best.
all this room ready.
Let me first say this is as safe as I've ever been. For anything I've ever done. It's a very good feeling.
Okay, are y'all ready?
Yeah.
Okay, Pete, go ahead.
Okay, good morning. My name is Pete Winstead. I'm the president of the Greater Austin Crime Commission. I want to say welcome on the first full day of spring. Let me say, my view is the wildfires all came out within 2 days. They're here now, so spring is here, and we're here. Also, I'd like to say that I love the traffic patterns this morning and all this week. And I've asked Mayor Adler to declare next week another week of spring break. Anyway, we're here today to talk about the first anniversary of the 2018 Austin serial bombings. We're here to honor the first responders for the work they do every day protecting the community, and not just when we have a bombing incident. The extraordinary dedication efforts that restored peace to our city couldn't be more important. Between March the 2nd and the 20th, 5 package bombs exploded in Austin, killing 2 innocent people and injuring 5. A police officer was also injured when the suspect detonated a device on March 21. At this time, I'd like you to join me in observing a moment of silence, remembering the people who are not here to enjoy the first day of spring. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me say this. During the worst of times, and that day was one of the worst, Austin, Central Texas was at its best. With my chamber hat on, Austin is #1 on lots of lists, and I think we're #1 on getting together and cooperating and having unity on how we approach these kinds of problems. The center of all of this was the extraordinary effort by the first responders. The Austin Police Department and their regional, state, and federal partners worked tirelessly to protect our community. Austin Police Chief Brian Manley was calm and diligent. He was open and transparent with the public, as he always is. And he demonstrated the compassion for a community in crisis. On behalf of a great community, can we give a round of applause to Chief Brian Manley? Obviously, the events of a year ago remind us that having adequate resources for public safety is the #1 job of government, including the city government, and we can never forget that. And I would just ask the mayor and the council members, city manager, to make this same commitment to public safety as we go forward. I also want to acknowledge the presence of members of the business community, leaders who are here today, many of whom are members of the Crime Commission board and directors. Can you all raise your hand? Let's give them a round of applause. Now it's my privilege to recognize our Austin City Manager, Spencer Cronk, for his remarks. When he came here a year ago, I think he knew that coming to Austin would be a trial by fire, getting the job. He did not realize we really meant that. So anyway, Spencer, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you, Pete. And as we reflect on the events of last March, I've often said that we saw the worst of our society in that bomber, but the best of our community. We saw law enforcement and first responders coming together in unprecedented ways. The collaboration and commitment that they had to keep our community safe was unprecedented. We also saw the best of our community in neighbors helping neighbors. We saw that everyone reached out and talked to each other, made sure each other were safe. If they saw something, they were going to say something. It's that type of spirit that keeps this Austin community alive, and it's something that I'm so proud to be a part of. So before I turn it over to the mayor, I did want to thank everyone in our community, but in particular our first responders and our law enforcement officials and Chief Manley for ensuring that our society and our community stayed safe throughout that time. Thank you. Mayor?
I appreciate the opportunity to be able to be here today and with my colleagues on the council, Councilmember Madison Harper, Councilmember Ellis with me here today. On a day like today, I think the first thing that we all need to do is to remember and do a prayer to Stephen House and his family, and Graylin Mason and his family. We had the opportunity, the chief manager and I, to visit with Ms. Herrera, who was injured but survived, and her family just a few days ago. You know, we remember these events on an annual basis and maybe sometime in between, but there are those among us that remember this every day because of the such profound change in their lives. And it's important for our community to remember them and their families. It was an event a year ago that was pretty horrific. Probably it's because Austin is such a safe city that events like this stand out in such stark relief. We can certainly applaud the safety of our city, and it stands out. And we need to thank on a day like today, as we did just a moment ago, our first responders, who not only did the work during those 10 days, but also year-round. I had the unique opportunity to watch what was happening from a front row seat as I watched the first responders, not only here in Austin, but also in our neighboring cities in Pflugerville and Sunset Valley and cities immediately surrounding us. But the state brought in not only state resources, but helped bring in resources to our city from other major cities, Houston and Dallas and San Antonio were all involved. And we had not one, but two, and probably more federal agencies that were involved in this. At one point, working 24/7 in our community, there were over 1,000 law enforcement officers that were working in our city to try to bring this episode to as quick a conclusion as we could. It is incredible to watch the professionalism and the dedication and the knowledge and the insight and the competence, but also the bravery of our first responders. The image will stick in my mind forever, as I'm sure all of us, the video, knowing that the car and the bomber were in the car, and there was probably a bomb with the bomber in the car. And quite frankly, while it was parked, hoping that more resources and equipment would arrive so that the car would never move. In the middle of that, the car did, and it took off, and it started heading toward I-35. And the first responders had to make a decision at that point, and the one thing they knew was that no one wanted to approach that car because there was a bomb that was potentially on side, which is why we were asking for that additional reinforcement. But the one thing that we knew was that that car could not reach the highway. It could not proceed. So in that instance, that video shows you stopping that vehicle and our first responders charging that vehicle, only to have it explode just as was feared and anticipated. We owe so much to those at our local level, at our state level, and our federal level that wake up every morning knowing that today could be a day when that becomes part of what they have to do. So it is important that we recognize that today as we are. Our community is also something that I think it's really important that we stop and take a moment and we recognize the value of what we have here. You could feel in those 10 days toward the end that our community was beginning to fray as people were dealing with the uncertainty. We didn't know how long it was going to go. We didn't know where it was coming from. We didn't know where it was going to strike next. We even had fears that it would just stop and we would never know what had happened, but we'd be waiting for the next shoe to drop. We had a community that was fraying, but through all of that, we had a community that was pulling together, a community that was looking out for one another, that was following the suggestions and advice to, you see something, say something. It was a community that recognized the need to know our neighbors better. And if there's one legacy of this that we carry forward, I would hope that that's what it would be. That we would continue to make sure that we walk across the street, we know our neighbors across the way, we know our neighbors upstairs or downstairs. We do that not only because we fear what we do not know, and if we don't know our neighbors, there's going to be some element of fear or anxiety in times like this, but also because it gives us a chance to recognize who living among us, who of our neighbors might need more support or more help. So I think that on a day like today, while we remember and we honor and we thank, we also resolve personally to make sure that we do a better job of knowing our neighbors. I'm going to turn the podium now over to our chief, but I also want to say that in my front row seat, being able to watch what was happening, we're talking about multiple agencies. The coordination effort associated with that was great. With not a lot of time to set up for it or to plan for it in the moment, to rely on the training. You have different agencies from different places, and we've all heard anecdotally the story about sometimes that doesn't work really well, as we have different agencies that are now cooperating in that moment. I was never so proud for our community when the assembled agencies decided in the first day or two that our chief was going to be left in charge of the entire operation. That says a lot for our chief. It's something that I am really proud of for our community, and a special thanks, Chief, goes to you.
You know, anniversaries always get us talking about things that happened, and when I think about a year ago, I just think about the violence and the time that we had here, and looking back on that now, knowing that we've got the Butler School of Music with a very accomplished orchestra that's missing a voice. We've got a school in Northeast Austin where kids look anxiously out at the audience knowing their parents are out there and they're giving a performance, singing, acting, whatever it is. And there's a parent missing. Those will be the things that we will remember, and we always need to remember the lives that were lost. Miss Herrera and others that were seriously injured that live with that every single day. We need to ensure that we are committed to doing our best by our community. And I am proud of the response that we had as a law enforcement community to what was an unprecedented attack on not only our city, but really any city across this country, and how law enforcement came together. This event would have exceeded the capacity of any police department regardless of size. And it was through the partnerships of the agencies that I'm going to recognize here in a moment that allowed us to accomplish what we accomplished here as quickly as we did, albeit with not without loss of life and lives changed forever. But again, it's through the assembled group of leaders that you see here today that happened. Colonel Croft, DPS with Lieutenant Colonel Hearn. If you'll remember, this incident happened at a time when the Austin Police Department had sidelined over 400 police cars due to carbon monoxide issues. We just simply didn't have the resources on the street to just really give that general sense of safety just for any week, any month, not given what we were undergoing. Graciously put 100 troopers in Austin in their vehicles so that our community could feel safe and be safe with their assistance. With the assistance of our other local agencies, Chief Robledo from the Pflugerville Police Department is here. We all know where this culminated. We know where the bomber lived. We know the impact that this had on the community of Pflugerville. And under her leadership, the Pflugerville Police Department stood side by side with us and made what was a very dangerous operation of taking down a bomb-making factory that much better for her team's efforts along with the federal partners. And although they're not in the room right now, the Round Rock Police Department under the leadership of Alan Banks and the Cedar Park Police Department with Sean Mannix played a significant role as well. Chief Banks was actually on scene the night the bomber detonated that bomb and took his life a year ago today. Our federal partners, I know Agent Mueller and Hudson are here. I think we've talked a lot about the resources that they brought to bear. What it took to crack this case, the amount of information that we collected from local businesses, the amount of video that we pulled in, the amount of work it went into collating all of that to put this thing together, the resources that the federal government brought to bear here through our partnerships with the ATF, the FBI, the Postal Service, again, allowed this to come together so quickly. This was an operation that also required the assistance of our partner agencies in fire and EMS. On every single scene, they were present, not only to aid the victims, but to ensure that the first responders were taken care of. And then they play a significant role on the team as well that goes to these hazardous situations. So, Chief Baker, I know that you were not here, but your department, as you know, is one of the finest fire departments across this country. And they stood tall and stood with us. And Chief Rodriguez, Jasper, I know you're here as well for EMS. It was an amazing response that we had. And it needs to be recognized. I hate that we're here recognizing it because that obviously means the incident happened. But my focus today is on remembering Draylon, remembering Mr. House, remembering Miss Herrera, remembering those two younger men that were injured in the Travis Country explosion, and then their family members that were so directly impacted by this, and praying that they have a way to find peace with everything that's happened and know that we stand with them as their community and their public safety service providers. So with that, I think we're going to close all of the official comments. We're not going to take questions in this room. However, if you do want to do any one-on-one interviews with any of the members that are here today, we will all be out at the atrium immediately following this press conference. So again, thank you for coming out here, and please let today be a day of remembrance for those that were so personally touched by this incident or those lives that were lost. Thank you.